First of all, when we all play by the same rules, we all have more fun. When we disagree about something, we can settle it like friends. And in the unfortunate event that there's damage or injury, there's a clear method for determining fault. Finally, it's just the right thing to do. So let's look at some ground rules for the talk. First of all, participate in the discussion. If you're watching this digitally and you have questions, feel free to email me. My contact info is available on the Inland website, and I'm sure Rick would take emails as well. And we'll talk about any questions you have. There are lots of points here where discussion will provide clarity, so don't hesitate to reach out with those questions. If you're here, don't tell war stories. That really slows this down. If you have specifics, we'll talk about it at the end. And when you see something different than you understand or you disagree with, speak up. It'll enhance everybody's understanding. And the last thing is we always describe the boats as her because it follows maritime tradition, not because we're sexist. Let's start out with what are the rules. First up is the Racing Rules of Sailing. The Racing Rules of Sailing is a book that is published by US Sailing and World Sailing. You can get it online or in hard copy format. This looks like this. And if you're here at the presentation or if you're watching this online, you can get a copy from the ILYA for $20, and it's great to have in your collection. World Sailing has a bunch of codes that go with this that can be found on their website. Those are things like the anti-doping code that the Olympians get tested for drugs in college sailing. National prescriptions, US Sailing makes a bunch of changes to these rules to make them comply with US law. And then our class rules, which in the scout country we call scantlings, always are in force, so you have to have your boat comply with your class rules. Those don't have to be in the notice of race or sailing instructions. Next one is the notice of race. Everything in there is a rule. Everything in your sailing instructions is a rule. And any other documents that might govern your race also count. If you're a high school or college sailor, that's your procedural rules. If you're racing in a distance race, that might be the deed of gift for the race. What are the Racing Rules of Sailing? World Sailing publishes those. They're available at sailing.org for free. You can download those. They're also available in World Sailing's app for free. If you're a US Sailing member, you can get it via the US Sailing app for free, and the first time you join, you get a copy of it for free. And those include those changes that we made for the US Sailing prescriptions. US Sailing has the hard copy book, and you can get it for $20 from the Inland if you're here tonight. What else is there? There's the appeals book. There are appeals in the United States, and there are cases internationally. And these are situations that people disagreed about, and they were hard enough to understand that they printed them. They are authoritative interpretations, but not rules themselves. And they'll make this available for $25, which is less than the list of $30 for the rule books, because they think it's important. It's a great learning tool. Everything that's in this book has the force of rules, including the definitions, the race signals, the introduction, and the preambles. In the front of the World Sailing book or in the back of the US Sailing book is the race signals. Every one of these has a rule attached to it, or is a rule in and of itself. Up front are the definitions. They're moved up to the front because they're really important. Almost every rule has a defined term, and you find those in italics. If you're reading the rules, there'll be a lot of flipping back and forth so you can know what's going on. And here in the presentation, we'll show each definition as it becomes relevant. An example of a definition is fetching, which is a boat is fetching a mark when she is in a position to pass to windward of it and leave it on the required side without changing tack. So next up are the basic principles in the book. This is where we really get into our message here in Fair Sailing. The first basic principle is sportsmanship and the rules. Competitors in the sport of sailing are governed by a body of rules that they are expected to follow and enforce. A fundamental principle of sportsmanship is when a competitor breaks a rule, they will promptly take a penalty, which may be to retire. The next basic principle is environmental responsibility. Participants are encouraged to minimize any adverse environmental impact from the sport of sailing. Right up after that are our fundamental rules. I call those our code of conduct. First one is help someone in danger and be safe yourself. The next one is fair sailing. Then we agree to accept the rules. You're responsible for your decision to race. Don't do drugs. don't gamble, and the list of the ways that you can be punished. So let's look at each one of these in a little more depth. Safety, first up. A boat or competitor shall give all possible to help to any person or vessel in danger. Up in the front of the book, a vessel is a defined term, which is anybody on the water, including the guy sinking in his canoe. So safety is important for everyone, not just those of us who are racing. World Sailing made an interpretation in one of their cases that when it's possible that any boat is in danger, another boat that gives help should be entitled to redress, even if the help was not asked for or if it was found that no danger existed. They're really driving home that no matter what, safety first. The next thing, part of that, is life-saving and personal flotation devices. You shall have enough safety devices to keep everybody on your boat safe. Next fundamental rule is fair sailing, and that's why we're here. It says that a boat and her owner shall compete in compliance with recognized principles of sportsmanship and fair play. A boat may be penalized under this rule only if it is clearly established that these principles have been violated. The penalty would either be disqualification or disqualification that is not excludable with a throw-out race. This is really why we're here. This is fair sailing. We all agree to abide by the rules and the standards set out in this rule book. An important concept here, a bigger boat rule. Small boats have the same rights as bigger boats racing. If you're sailing multiple fleets, it doesn't matter that you might be in an Optimist if you still have right of way over that A-scow. And that happens all over the world where the big boats think that they're entitled to more room, and that's against that principle of fair sailing. Here's an example of a really egregious violation of that bigger boat rule concept. This is the Maltese Falcon getting T-boned by a 33-foot keelboat, and the Maltese Falcon was found at fault and disqualified. An example of fair sailing, a boat that deliberately hails starboard when she knows she's on port has not acted fairly and has broken Rule 2. So this goes to bullying a little bit, and anytime that there's bullying, that really goes into the realm of Rule 2 fair sailing and has penalties beyond just a normal disqualification. The next fundamental rule is acceptance of the rules. You can read through all of this here on the screen or on your slide online, but there are 5 ways here that we agree to accept the rules, and this really sets the legal doctrine for when it becomes really important that the insurance companies have gotten involved. All of these 5 statements about why we agree to accept the rules in the different ways means that you are bound by U.S. law to the racing rules and not to the general right-of-way rules on the water if you've both agreed to be in this race. So it's very wordy, but it's very, very important that this is here. The next one is your decision to race. The responsibility for a boat's decision to participate in a race or continue racing is hers alone. That means that you're responsible for the safety of your own vessel. The person in charge of your boat is responsible for their own people. It's not the race committee's job to decide that it's too dangerous for you. That is entirely up to you, and that's very important as we talk about liability trains and really personal responsibility. The next rules, the first one is anti-doping. At any high level of racing, you can be monitored by USADA, and there's drug testing, and there's a whole policy on anti-doping. The next one is betting and anti-corruption. There's no betting on sailing, and if there is, that's a breach of the rules. And the last one references the disciplinary code, which is published by World Sailing, and when you break any one of these fundamental rules, there's a disciplinary code that spells out how that's handled. Recapping part 1, it's the code of conduct. Help someone in danger and be safe. Fair sailing, accept the rules. You're responsible for your decision to race. Don't do drugs, don't gamble, and it lists the ways you can be punished. That's all of part 1, and now we're moving on to part 2, and I'll hand it off to Rick.